Hi, everyone. I'm here today with Sergeant James. He's someone I've been talking to for a little while now. Great guy. Really excited to have him on. So thanks for being here and really appreciate it. And I was hoping you could just give a little intro of yourself, your background, and we'll go from there.
Okay. My name is James. Like I said, I'm a sergeant with the San Bernardino County Sheriff's Department in Southern California. I have 26 years in law enforcement, spread across 3 departments in that time. I've worked just about every assignment you can work, from SWAT to major narcotics, auto theft task force. Currently the traffic sergeant at the Sheriff's Department, handling major collision investigation and traffic collision reconstruction. Married, 4 kids that are all grown, raising our granddaughter, and life's good.
Great. I'm glad to hear it. I mean, I'm going to jump right in. I'm curious, over 20 years, that's a very, very long time. How do you feel things have changed over those 20 years leading up to this moment, let's say?
I think over the last 20 years, what I've seen in my career is a big shift in the public's attitude towards law enforcement. And a lot of that may be the advent of social media, and we see news immediately. Every news cycle happens almost immediately with social media. Everything gets out, whereas in the past it may have taken longer. And sometimes I think maybe people pay too much attention to social media and what they see, because out in the public, at least in the city where I work, we've got a lot of public support. But if you look at the mainstream media and a lot of the stuff you see in social media, there's this almost hatred of law enforcement or of anything that is holding people accountable. It seems that a lot of personal accountability has gone out the window, and just the way that the public, again, from the perspective that we see, just don't have a lot of tolerance for law enforcement. And I think there's a lot of, when you look at things like people talk about racism and the way that you can't lump everyone together because of one offender. Well, that goes for the police too. You can't look at isolated incidents through a vacuum and then paint that broad stroke across. I think there's 800,000 officers in the United States.
Yeah. Close to 900, over
Yeah.
870. I mean, the number's coming down, sadly, but and over 60 million police interactions a year, and
Correct.
very, 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 very few negative outcomes. Statistically,
Exactly. It's in the 1/10%. I mean, the number's minuscule.
Yeah, it's minuscule. But, like you said, the media goes crazy with it. I just saw something, and this is interesting to me, and it touches on what you were talking about, where there was an article that came out, and they're talking about how this guy died. The headline says, "Man pinned down on hot asphalt in 100-degree weather for 4 minutes dies after police arrest." Then you read the article, he was like doing something to cars, and he ran away from the cops, and he threw something at the cops, and then all they did, he got in a scuffle with one of the cops. All they did was arrest him, cuff him. The guy was very, very strong. I don't know the details. I can't say if anything happened that's wrong, but everyone already has an opinion. The video hasn't been released, the details, but the headlines are so inflammatory. So the media is really what's propelling this.
Without a doubt, the mainstream media and the headlines that they release, it's the whole gotcha thing. We're going to release this headline. It's the clickbait. And how many people actually click on that article and then read the whole article? Not many.
No one.
Even if there's video, they show that portion of the video that makes things look bad. You very rarely get to see what happened throughout the whole video. And a lot of times the video or the person recording doesn't even start recording until the incident is close to where the force is used. They don't get any of what led up to it.
Yeah, like the 30 minutes leading up to the situation that happened with Officer Rolfe at the Wendy's there, where they were polite to the guy for 30 minutes until
Correct.
They finally arrested him. And then he full on resisted, didn't want to be arrested, stole their taser. I mean, there was a 30-minute lead up. That's a lot of patience from an officer.
Absolutely.
And something you touched on, which I think is nice, you said that there's actually a lot of public support when you're out on the street.
Yeah.
So that's also very counter to what we're being told. I'm happy to hear that.
Yeah, and a lot of that I think depends on where you're at. Our county is the largest county geographically in the nation. We're over 20,000 square miles. So we cover a lot of territory. We have a lot of contract cities. The city I work in, Rancho Cucamonga, was just nominated one of America's top cities. We're normally one of the safest cities in the state of California, and we have a ton of public support.
Fantastic. I want to jump right in also to what you do outside of working as a sergeant. I know that you have your own foundation, or you work with the foundation. I'm not sure. Is it yours or?
Well, I'm a board member of the Cannonball Memorial Run. A few years ago, two of our sergeants were sitting around having a beer in their backyard and talking about the number of officers who have been killed in the line of duty and how that number has been on the rise over the past few years after it had been in a decline for several years. And just decided, what can we do about this? Can we do to raise awareness? And they were talking about the movie, The Cannonball Run, and they thought, hey, why don't we drive across the United States, see if we can raise awareness? And from that, it's turned into, we're a 501c3 nonprofit. We raise money for the families of fallen law enforcement officers. So basically what happens within 24 hours of an officer being killed in the line of duty, we send the family a check. We're the first and only right now immediate financial relief fund in the United States for the families of fallen law enforcement officers. They can get state and federal funds, but that always requires a death certificate, life insurance. A lot of the monies that families can get to help them out can take up to a year to get.
Wow.
And in a lot of agencies, especially when you're talking the South and the East Coast, a lot of those agencies, officers aren't paid well. I know a lot of the officers back on the South and the East Coast make minimum wage, and their last check that their family gets is their last check. That's it. They don't have anything else coming in. So to be able to provide some sort of financial relief for the family is what we're trying to do, as well as, like I said, the raising awareness to the number of officers killed in the line of duty. It's on average, it's about 160 officers a year are killed in the line of duty. So with once a year with our Cannonball Run portion of it, we start in LA. It's the reverse of the traditional Cannonball route. The Cannonball route traditionally is New York to LA. We do it reverse. We start in LA and then we drive to Washington, DC. And the only stops we make on the drive are at agencies who have lost an officer within the last year. And we present them with a plaque for the family and a plaque for the agency to commemorate the loss of their officer. While we're there, we also collect a patch from the agency. And at the end of our drive, we meet with the Attorney General of the United States and present him with all of the patches of officers who have been killed in the line of duty in the last year.
Well, I hope everyone watching this takes time to support, because I know I've been talking to you for some time now, and I think what you're doing is extremely special. There's a lot of charities out there that sadly may have, unethical elements to them. You're not one of them. You're 100% transparent, and you're doing it because you're all people from that background who care, who want to take care of these families. Do you have any stories that are, that you can share with anyone that, for example, like a circumstance of this officer lost his life from this happening, just so people are aware of how, because a lot of people don't actually really think about how officers lose their lives, how crazy these things happen in a second. And if you know any stories that you're comfortable sharing.
Well, personally, a few years ago, we had the Christopher Dorner incident in Big Bear, California. Christopher Dorner was a LAPD officer who had been terminated. And because he was angry about that, he went on a killing spree. He killed the daughter of the captain from LAPD who had represented him in his hearing, as well as that captain's daughter. He killed her boyfriend, who was a police officer. There was a statewide manhunt for him. He ended up in Big Bear after killing a Riverside officer, Michael Crane, who he just happened upon. Crane didn't even know he was there. Opened fire on Crane and his trainee, killing Officer Crane and injuring his trainee. He then went up and hid up in Big Bear for several days until we located where he was. He had taken some people hostage in a house. When he left, they were able to call the police. We were able to track him down. As two of our deputies We're standing out in the street in the area where they lost a view of him. He opened fire with a suppressed rifle from inside of a cabin, killing Detective Jeremiah McKay, who was a friend of mine, and injuring Deputy Alex Collins, who was shot several times. And fortunately, he was able to make a full recovery and is back working. But Detective McKay lost his life in that incident. And that was, before we started this foundation. And it's a deeply personal thing when you lose a friend in the line of duty like that.
Yeah, that's an incredibly tragic story. It's just sounds like someone spiraling completely. And
yeah, and when you look at you brought up, there are a lot of charities that are unethical. Just so people know, 99.9% of all the money we take in goes directly to the families of the fallen law enforcement officers. The drive that we take across the United States, all of the officers that go on that fund that out of their own pockets. We don't take any of the money from the foundation for that. We all pay for the gas, the rental vehicles, our flights back from there. So all of that money that people donate and that we raise, all of it goes, the 0.1 or 2% is what PayPal takes out for their funds or their fees. But everything else goes directly to the foundation and to the families of fallen law enforcement officers. We also help to fund a summer camp with the cops, Concerns of Police Survivors.
Yep.
They have a camp for children of fallen officers, and we fund a scholarship for a child to be able to go to that camp as well.
Incredible. That's incredible. It's interesting. What I like also is this brings a little bit of attention to what the families of law enforcement go through, because I've been interviewing people and talking to people, and I get these emails when we put out the video from a lot of not just law enforcement, but their wives, their parents, and people don't understand the fear today that they're living with. Not only for the people that are in their family that are in law enforcement, but for themselves just being associated with law enforcement. I had people writing in saying, if someone knew that my son was law enforcement, someone found out and they started vandalizing my home. Someone started bullying my kids because my husband is in law enforcement.
Correct.
There was more attention on this because these people are risking their lives every day. Their families are completely. Anytime you go after someone's family, I think you have a real problem. Like that's a real. I don't want to talk about how I feel about it. It makes it really disgusting. You're going after kids now, or an innocent wife. If you have a problem, keep it with the issue on hand. And so I think what you're doing really takes care of those people in their most difficult situation, which is losing someone that they just loved who is in that situation. And they may not even be getting the support they need right now from society, because society are vilifying police so much that I notice when I go on Facebook and someone posts a police officer died. My friend just did it. She's, unabashedly pro-police. People come on and they're like, good, dead pig, dead cop. That you don't realize this person has a family, they have kids, they're a human being. So again, I think it's really important that we take care of the families of law enforcement. Just in terms of how you see things progressing, do you see a solution kind of to the current rhetoric we have right now? Do you think it's going to die down and people, like, it's kind of happening in cycles? Because I've never seen it this bad personally. And I hope that it's just peaking and then support kind of comes back and then, it's just a natural cycle. But I'm just curious how you feel about it.
Well, I'm hoping after the election, but
yeah.
I think really what it comes down to is, and it comes down to, we need to learn to be able to have nuanced discussions with each other. Everything is so polarized left and right now that, and even amongst people to the left and to the right, if you're not right far enough, then you're going to get demonized by your own people, or you're not to the left far enough. What used to be, so I mean, there's all of these small splinter groups that are just so against each other. And I really think we need to start, if we can agree on what the problem is, even if we don't agree on the solutions, if we can agree what the problem is, at least we can start to work towards the solution with each other, because then at least we're agreeing on something and we can start to talk. There's so much outrage and anger, and people are equating, if I'm this emotional with something, that means I'm right. Well, just because you're emotional and passionate about it doesn't mean you're correct. Absolutely. We need to be able to have nuanced discussions with each other and conversations, and not the shouting names and epithets back at each other and think that that's going to solve anything.
Where do you think that you said earlier that there was a decay of personal responsibility, that kind of, you're right, that we're relying more on emotion than we are on facts and being able to look at data? Because when I tell people, it's interesting, when I tell people, hey, if you look at 2019, there was a total of nine total unarmed Black people killed by police, in which I believe 6 of the cases had witnesses present to defend the police who were citizens and say, no, that officer was being attacked. So you're left with like 3, and there's over 60 million police interactions a year. I tell people that fact, they don't care. They're no longer listening to fact. It doesn't mean anything to them. They're like, 1 is too much. Police are racist. Cops are all bad. Cops. And so I don't know, from a police officer's perspective, how do you get through to people? I'm going out, I'm trying to affect some change. And I feel like sometimes I'm hitting a brick wall, just telling people, hey, I used to be scared of airplanes. I went through this weird phase where I was scared of airplanes.
Right.
My dad's a really smart guy, and he sat me down and he's like, how you feel about airplanes is not the reality of airplanes. You have a 1 in 60 million chance, or something like that, 1 in 20 to 1 in 60 million, depending on the year, of dying on a commercial airliner inside the United States. It's the safest thing you can do in the world. You are just associating certain fears with it: fear of lack of control, fear of this. So I think the same thing happens with police officers, or that the media, when a plane crashes, the media goes crazy, shows it. You talk about the dead people, 200, they do stories, and you start associating with it. Oh my God, what would it be like for me? The same thing happens with police. I've noticed all the time that's the same thing. Well, if you were in my neighborhood and you saw, like, or if you were my skin color and you saw someone die, you'd associate it with yourself. Well, there's tens of millions of Black people in America. Because 1 Black person dies from a police officer does not mean all Black people are at risk of dying. There were other factors at play. Were they committing a crime? Were they armed? Were they resisting arrest? And did the cop even do anything wrong? So there's just all this stuff around it. So I'm curious, how do you get through to people to try and convince them?
You know, it's a good question. It's a matter of cognitive dissonance. I think people lock into their minds their views, and they're just not open to, because as soon as you start to show them statistics, and again, you know, there's the statistic that's put out that, you know, when they use the percentage, well, it's because of the number of Blacks in society, there's 13%. So when you extrapolate that out, well, you can't look at numbers in a vacuum. If you look at strict numbers, sure, it may look like cops inordinately shoot Black people, but you can't look at numbers in a vacuum. You have to look at all of the factors that go along with it. Yes. How many interactions were there with African Americans? How many, you know, criminal arrests were made? Where was the neighborhood it was made in? And that goes to a much bigger, you know, socioeconomic talk about, you know, inner city neighborhoods and what have, you know, what has government done in those neighborhoods to financially pick them up or not. And, you know, you can get into the political argument of most of those neighborhoods are in blue areas that have been historically that way. But, you know, that's neither here nor there. What is the socioeconomic status of the people in those neighborhoods, and what do they feel they have to do? You know, what kind of strain, you know, there's strain theories and all kinds of sociological theories, but what kind of stress are those people under that they feel they need to commit crime to be able to, you know, make ends meet and make their lives worth living? And that, you know, it goes into a much bigger issue.
Yeah.
So when you talk about, you know, what can we do? I don't know. We just got to keep trying to educate people and have the conversation, and not just say, you know what, screw it, these people aren't going to listen, so it's not worth having the discussion. We just need to keep getting the information out, and hopefully people who are influencers in those neighborhoods and those places pick it up. Because, you know, the number one way to not get shot by the police or not get in a use of force of the police is just comply.
Yes.
When an officer contacts you, if you think the officer's wrong or doing wrong, then go complain later. You know, our policies are, you know, as a sergeant, we shall take complaints. We don't kiss off complaints. We take them very seriously. And maybe there's agencies that don't. But in the moment when you're right there with the officer, let's say that he is a complete a-hole. Do you think you're going to win? If that officer's on a power trip, no matter what you do, you're not going to win. So comply then, and later go make a complaint.
Yeah.
But even if it's complete off the rails officer, And even if you go and make a complaint and it goes nowhere, you're alive at the end of the day, or you're not in jail, or whatever the case may be. Just comply. And are there bad officers? Absolutely. I don't think you will find a police officer in this country that will tell you that there aren't bad cops out there, because there are people that squeak through the cracks, that game the system and beat the system and end up on police forces. It happens, just like it does in every other profession in the world. Doctors, medical malpractice kill 300,000 people a year. Do we hear anyone screaming for defund the hospitals? It happens. We're human. And I think that's the thing that we need to get across to people is, remember, at the end of the day, cops are your neighbors. They're human beings. They make mistakes. We're not perfect. There's nothing it wasn't Jesus and the police were perfect. We make mistakes, and we need to own up to those mistakes and learn from them and go from there.
I think what you just said is the most powerful thing, because I think one of the things, you're talking about where I feel that sometimes the right, loses its message is by trying to prove people wrong. You hear someone in a community saying, hey, I feel like this is going on. I feel like this is happening. I feel like my life's in danger. The worst thing you can do is dismiss their fears and say they're wrong. You have to say, I'm here to listen to you. I'm here to talk to you. But maybe the problem isn't coming from where you think it is. Like you were talking about earlier in inner cities, maybe if we look at the breakdown of the two-parent household in inner cities, if we look at the policies that have been imposed in inner cities for decades. And so, but we can't look at those things when the entire focus is police, bad, police. I feel like it's a diversion, to be honest, my personal opinion, and it distracts from who's really responsible for all of it. But I think you touched on it perfectly, and I hope that everyone watching it knows now that the best way when you encounter someone who is very, very angry, feels like there's a problem in their life because of a police officer, because of whatever that may be, first come at it from a place of empathy, because you're only going to affect change through coming at it from that point of view. Saying, I'm here to listen to you. Like you said, I'm not denying there's a problem. There are bad police officers, but is it as pervasive as people say? Is that the real issue? And let's look at it and let's find out who's really holding you back.
Well, and I think on both sides of this, we need to learn to look at people and treat people with a little bit of grace. You don't know, as a police officer, I don't know what that person has just gone through that I'm contacting. And on the flip side of that, they don't know what call I just came from. I could have come from, we've had a rash of teenagers and kids younger than that hanging themselves and committing suicide. We could have just come from a suicide call of a 9-year-old. You don't know what the officer has just had before he contacts you. And we're human. And yeah, we try and compartmentalize and put those emotions aside. But at the end of the day, we're still human. And, the calls that have affected me most in my life are kid calls, dealing with children. It's compassion. And as much as you want to try and compartmentalize that, if that's the call you're coming from, that may come through and you may think, oh, this cop's being, he's being a jerk. He's being cold to me. He's just cutting me off and not listening to me. He doesn't know what I've been through. Well, the flip side of that, you don't know what he's been through. If we can start to treat each other with a little bit of grace and look at each other with open human eyes that say, hey, this guy may have something going on. And that goes from both sides, officers as well. A lot of officers come across as robots. We need to let people know that we are human. You can compartmentalize and do your officer safety without coming off as a cold-hearted person that doesn't have any empathy or care for the citizen you're stopping or talking to.
Well, I think you pretty much just gave the best speech ever. Yeah, I hope people take it to heart. I've been trying to keep these shorter. I know we did just go about 25 minutes, which was the target timeline, and I think we covered everything I would have hoped to cover. So I really appreciate having you on. I think it was very powerful, everything you said.
I appreciate it. If I could just let people know, there's a documentary on Amazon Prime of our across the United States. So if you go to Amazon Prime and search Cannonball Memorial Run, there's a 30-minute documentary, so it's not too long, but it tells our story of what we do as we go across the United States, paying tribute to the officers that have fallen. And then our webpage is cannonballmemorialrun.org, www.cannonballrun.org. And there's links to donate there, or ways you can get involved if anyone's interested. We have golf tournaments throughout the year. We're trying to do one in each section of the country, in the 4 quadrants of the country, so people can get involved with that. and just take care of each other.
I'm going to also put all the information down below in the description. So please support. And yeah, thank you again.